When Pele came to the island Hawaii seeking a permanent home, she found another god of fire already in possession of the territory. Ailau was known and feared by all the people. Ai means the one who eats or devours. Lao means tree or a forest. Ailau was therefore the fire god devouring forests. Time and again he laid the districts of South Hawaii desolate by the lava he poured out from his fire pits. He was the god of the insatiable appetite, the continual eater of trees, whose path through forests was covered with black smoke fragrant with burning wood, and sometimes burdened with the smell of human flesh charred into cinders in the lava flow. Ailau seemed to be destructive and was so named by the people, but his fires were a part of the forces of creation. He built up the islands for future life. The process of creation demanded volcanic activity. The flowing lava made land. The lava disintegrating made earth deposits and soil. Upon this land storms fell, and through it multitudes of streams found their way to the sea. Flowing rivers came from the cloud-capped mountains. Fruitful fields and savage homes made this miniature world building complete. Ailau still poured out his fire. It spread over the fertile fields, and the natives feared him as the destroyer, giving no thought to the final good. He lived, the legends say, for a long time in a very ancient part of Kilauea on the large island of Hawaii, now separated by a narrow ledge from the great crater and called Kilauea Iki. Little Kilauea. This seems to be the first and greatest of a number of craters extending in a line from the great lake of fire in Kilauea to the seacoast many miles away. They are called the pit craters because they are not hills of lava, but a series of sunken pits going deep down into the earth, some of them still having blowholes of sputtering steam and smoke. After a time, Ailau left these pit craters and went into the great crater and was said to be living there when Pele came to the seashore far below. In one of the Pele stories is the following literal translation of the account of her taking Kilauea. When Pele came to the island Hawaii, she first stopped at a place called Keahi'alaka in the district of Puna. From this place she began her inland journey toward the mountains. As she passed on her way, there grew within her an intense desire to go at once and see Ailau, the god to whom Kilauea belonged, and find a resting place with him as the end of her journey. She came up, but Ailau was not in his house. Of a truth, he had made himself thoroughly lost. He had vanished because he knew that this one coming toward him was Pele. He had seen her toiling down by the sea at Keahi'alaka. Trembling dread and heavy fear overpowered him. He ran away and was entirely lost. When Pele came to that pit, she laid out the plan for her abiding home, beginning at once to dig up the foundations. She dug day and night and found that this place fulfilled all her desires. Therefore she fastened herself tight to Hawaii for all time. These are the words in which the legend disposes of this ancient god of volcanic fires. He disappears from Hawaiian thought, and Pele from a foreign land finds a satisfactory crater in which her spirit power can always dig up everlastingly overflowing fountains of raging lava. To how Pele came to Hawaii. The simplest, most beautiful legend does not mention the land from which Pele started. In this legend, her father was Momoea, Oli, the chief who dreamed of trouble. Her mother was Haumea, or Papa, who personified Mother Earth. Moamoa apparently is not mentioned in any other of the legends. Haumea is frequently named as the mother of Pele, as well as the heroine of many legendary experiences. Pele's story is that of wanderlust. She was living in a happy home in the presence of her parents, and yet for a long time she was stirred by thoughts of faraway lands. At last she asked her father to send her away. This meant that he must provide a sea-going canoe with mat sails, sufficiently large to carry a number of persons and food for many days. "What will you do with your little egg, sister?" asked her father. Pele caught the egg, wrapped it in her skirt to keep it warm near her body, and said that it should always be with her. Evidently, in a very short time, the egg was changed into a beautiful little girl who bore the name Hiaiaka Aikapali o Pele, Hiaka in the bosom of Pele, the youngest one of the Pele family. After the care of the helpless one had been provided for, Pele was sent to her oldest brother, Ka Moho Ali, the king of dragons, or, as he was later known in Hawaiian mythology, the god of sharks. He was a sea god and would provide the great canoe for the journey. While he was getting all things ready, he asked Pele where she was going. She replied, "I am going to Bola Bola, to Kwai Hilani, to Kainhunamoku, then to Moku Manamana, then to see a queen, Kauahi her name and Nihau her island." Apparently her journey would be first to Bola Bola in the Society Islands, then among the mysterious ancestral islands, and then to the northwest until she found Nihau, the most northerly of the Hawaiian group. The god of sharks prepared his large canoe and put it in the care of some of their relatives, Kane, Puahaio, Kane, the whirlwind, K.O. Miki, the strong current, and K.O.Ka, moving seas. Pele was carried from land to land by these wise boatmen, until at last she landed on the island Nihau. Then she sent back the boat to her brother, the shark god. It is said that after a time he brought all the brothers and sisters to Hawaii. Pele was welcomed and entertained. Soon she went over to Kauai, the large, beautiful garden island of the Hawaiian group. There is a story of her appearance as a dream maiden before the king of Kauai, whose name was Lohio, whom she married but with whom she could not stay until she had found a place where she could build a permanent home for herself and all who belonged to her. She had a magic digging tool, Pa'oa. When she struck this down into the earth, it made a fire pit. It was with this Pa'oa that she was to build a home for herself and Lohio. She dug along the lowlands of Kauai, but water drowned the fires she kindled, so she went from island to island, but could only dig along the beach near the sea. All her fire pits were so near the water that they burst out in great explosions of steam and sand, and quickly died, until at last she found Kilauea on the large island of Hawaii. There she built a mighty enduring palace of fire, but her dream marriage was at an end. The little sister Hiaka, after many adventures, married Lohio and lived on Kauai. Another story says that Pele was the daughter of Kane Hoalani and Hina. The oldest and most authoritative legends say that Kane Hoalani was her brother, and that Hina was the creator of a flood or great tidal wave which drove Pele from place to place over the ocean. This story says that Pele had a husband, Wahioloa, who ran away from her with a sister named Pele Kumukalani, and that Pele searched the islands of the great ocean as she followed them, but never found them. At last Pele came to Hawaii and escaped the flood by finding a home in Kilauea. In this story she was said to have a son Menahune and a daughter Laka. There is very little foundation for this legend. Wahioloa was a chief, well known in the legends, of a famous family of New Zealand and other South Sea islands. Laka was his son, who cut down trees by day which were set up again at night by the fairies. The Menahunis were the fairy folk of Hawaii. The story of Pele's search for a husband has been widely accepted by foreigners, but not by the early Hawaiian writers. The most authoritative story of the coming of Pele to Hawaii was of Aukalinui Aiku in 1861, and in another Hawaiian paper, Ke Koakoa, in 1864, and again in 1865. Again and again the legends give Kuwaha'ilo as the father and Haumea as the mother of the Pele family. Hina is sometimes said to be Kuwaha'ilo's sister in these legends. She quarreled with him because he devoured all the people. The Hawaiians as a nation, even in their traditions, have never been cannibals. although their legends give many individual instances of cannibalism. The Pele stories say that Kuaha'ilo was a cannibal and Haumea was a pali precipice or a prominent part of the earth. The Hawaiians, it is safe to say, had no idea of reading nature thoughts into these expressions, thus making them nature myths. They probably did not understand that Kuaha'ilo might mean destructive earth forces, and Haumea might mean the earth itself, from whom Pele, the goddess of fire, and Namaka'okahai, the goddess of the sea, were born. It is, however, interesting to note that this is the fact in the legends, and that it was in a conflict between the two sisters that Namaka'okahai drove Pele to the Hawaiian Islands. A greater sorcerer married Namaka'okahai. After a time he saw Pele and her beautiful young sister Hiaka. He took them secretly to be his wives. This sorcerer was Okele Nui Aiku. Ao might mean to swim, and Kele to glide or slip smoothly along. The name then might mean the great smoothly swimming son of Iku. He could fly through the heavens, swim through the seas, or run swiftly over the earth. By magic power he conquered enemies, visited strange lands, found the fountain of the water of life, sprinkled that water over his dead brothers, brought them back to life, and did many marvelous deeds. But he could not deliver Pele and Hiaka from the wrath of their sister. High tides and floods from the seas destroyed Pele's home and lands. Then the elder brother of Pele, Kamoho'ali, the shark god, called for all the family to aid Pele. Namaka'okahai fought the whole family and defeated them. She broke down their houses and drove them into the ocean. There Kamoho'ali provided them with the great boat Honwa'i Akea, the great spread-out world, and carried them away to distant islands. Namaka'okahai went to the highest of all the mythical lands of the ancestors, Nu Mia Lani, the raised dais of heaven. There she could look over all the seas from Kalakenui, Akane to Kauai, i.e. from a legendary land in the south to the most northerly part of the Hawaiian Islands. Pele carried her paua, a magic spade. Wherever they landed, she struck the earth, thus opening a crater in which volcanic fires burned. As the smoke rose to the clouds, the angry Watching One rushed from Nuumealani and tried to slay the family. Again and again they escaped. Farther and farther from the homeland were they driven until they struck far out into the ocean. Namaka'okahai went back to her lookout mountain. After a long time, she saw the smoke of earth fires far away on the island Kauai. Pele had struck her paua into the earth, dug a deep pit, and thrown up a large hill known to this day as the Pu'u Pele. The Hill of Pele. It seemed as if an abiding place had been found. But the sister came and fought Pele. There is no long account of the battle. Pele was broken and smashed and left for dead. She was not dead, but she left Kauai and went to Oahu, to a place near Honolulu, to Moanalua, a beautiful suburb. There she dug a fire pit. The earth, or rather the eruption of lava, was forced up into a hill which later bore the name Kealia Manu, the bird white-like, a salt bed or the white bird. The crater which she dug filled up with salt water and was named Kealia Paekai, the white bed of salt or salt lake. Pele was not able to strike her paua down into a mountainside and dig deep for the foundations of her home. She could find fire only in the lowlands near the seashore. The best place on Oahu was just back of Lehigh, the ancient Hawaiian name for Diamond Head. Here she threw up a great quantity of fire rock, but at last her fires were drowned by the water she struck below. Thus she passed along the coast of each island, the family watching and aiding until they came to the great volcano Haleakala. There Pele dug with her paua, and a great quantity of lava was thrown out of her fire pit. Namaka'okahai saw enduring clouds day after day rising with the colors of the dark, dense smoke of the underworld, and knew that her sister was still living. Pele had gained strength and confidence, therefore she entered alone into a conflict unto death. The battle was fought by the two sisters hand to hand. The conflict lasted for a long time along the western slope of the mountain Hail-Akala. Namaka o Kahai tore the body of Pele and broke her lava bones into great pieces which lie to this day along the seacoast of the district called Kahiki Nui. The masses of broken lava are called Na Iwi o Pele, the bones of Pele. Pele was thought to be dead and was sorely mourned by the remaining brothers and sisters. Namaka Okahai went off toward Nu Mealani, rejoicing in the destruction of her hated enemy. By and by she looked back over the wide seas. The high mountains of the island Hawaii, snow-covered, lay in the distance. But over the side of the mountain known as Mauna Loa, she saw the Yuhane, the spirit form of Pele, in clouds of volcanic smoke tinged red from the flames of raging fire pits below. She passed on to Nu Mealani, knowing that she could never again overcome the spirit of Pele, the goddess of fire. The Pele family crossed the channel between the islands and went to the mountainside, for they also had seen the spirit form of Pele. They served their goddess sister, caring for her fires and pouring out the destructive rivers of lava at her commands. As time passed, they became a part of the innumerable multitude of Omakwas, or ghost gods, of the pit of Pele, worshipped especially by those whose lives were filled with burning anger against their fellow men. The acceptable offerings to Pele were fruits, flowers, garlands, or lease, pigs, especially the small black pig of tender flesh and delicate flavor, chickens, fish, and men. When a family sent a part of the dead body of one of the household, it was with the prayer that the spirit might become an Omakua, and especially an Unihipili Omakua. This meant a ghost god, powerful enough to aid the worshipper to pray other people to death. Pele is said to have become impatient at times with her brothers and sisters. Then she would destroy their pleasure resorts in the valleys. She would send a flood of lava in her anger and burn everything up. Earthquakes came when Pele stamped the floor of the fire pit in anger. Flames thrusting themselves through cracks in a breaking lava crust were the fire spears of Pele's household of Omakwas, or ghost gods. Pele's voice was explosive when angry. Therefore it was called Pu. When the natives first heard guns fired, they said that the voice of the gun was Pu. It was like the explosions of gas in volcanic eruptions, and it seemed as if the foreigners had persuaded Pele to assist them in any trouble with the natives. 3. Pelen, the owl ghost god. Many, many years after Pele's angry sister, Namaka o Kahai, had driven her from the island, Kauai, and after the land had many dwellers therein, a quarrel arose between two of the highest chiefs of the island. They were named Koa and Kau. It did not become an open conflict immediately, but Koa was filled with such deep hatred that he was ready to employ any means to destroy his enemy. There was a mighty kupua, or dragon of the Pi family, at that time on Kauai. These dragons had come, according to the legends, to the Hawaiian Islands from the faraway lands of Kuaihilani as attendants on the first young chief Kahanai Ake Akua, the boy brought up by the gods. These dragons had the mana, or magic power, of appearing as men or as dragons according to their desire. This dragon was named Pi Kalalau, or Pi, the one dwelling at Kalalau. He was supposed to be semi-divine. His home was on the crest of an almost inaccessible precipice up which he would rush with incredible speed. Koa, the angry chief, came to this precipice and called Pi to come to him. There they plotted the death of Kau, the enemy. Assuming the appearance of a splendidly formed young man, Pi went down among the natives with Kaua to watch for an opportunity to seize Kau. After a time, Kau was lured to go at night to a house far from his own home. As he entered the door, he received a heavy blow which smashed the bones of one shoulder and laid him prostrate. A great giant leaped out, thrusting an enormous spear at him. Kao was one of the most skillful of all chiefs in what was known as spear practice. He avoided the thrusts and leaped to his feet. He had a wooden dagger as his only weapon, but could not get near enough to the giant to use it. Just as he was becoming too weary to move, his wife, who had followed him, hurled rocks, striking the giant's face, then seizing her husband, fled with him homeward. There followed a great battle in which Pia attacked all the warriors belonging to the wounded chief. The legends say that this giant was 12 feet high. He had eyes as large as a man's fist and an immense mouth full of tusks like those of a wild hog. His legs were as large as trees, and his weight was such that wherever he stepped there were great holes in the ground. The warriors fled as this mighty giant charged upon them. Suddenly they stopped and rushed back. Their chief's wife had caught an ikoi, a heavy piece of wood fastened to a long, stout cord. This she hurled so that it twisted around him and bound his arms to his sides. Stones and spears beat upon him, but he broke the cocoa fiber cords of the ikoi and again drove the warriors before him, trying to gain the house where the wounded chief Kao was lying. There was an old prophetess who had rushed to the side of her master when he was brought to his home. She was one of the worshippers of Pele, the fire goddess of the island Hawaii. Powerful were her prayers and incantations. Soon out of the clear sky above the conflict appeared Pele hurling a fierce bolt of lightning at the giant. It struck the ground at his feet, almost overthrowing him. A second flash of lightning blinded and stunned him. It was a curious element of old Hawaiian belief, but they did believe that demigods and supernatural beings had omakuas, or ghost gods, the spirits of their ancestors, to whom they prayed and offered sacrifice as if they were common people and needed ghost gods to take care of them. Pi, smitten by this new danger, called for Pueo, his most mighty ghost god. Pele's fire darts were falling upon him and he was near death. Then came Pueo, flying down from the steep places of the mountain. Pueo was a great owl in which dwelt one of the most powerful of Pi's ancestors. Pueo hovered over the head of Pi facing Pele. Whenever Pele hurled her fiery darts, the owl swiftly thrust his head from side to side, catching them in his beak and with a shake of the head tossing them off to the ground. Then came the warriors in a great body around the giant and his ghost god. Thickly flew their spears and darts. Great clouds of stones were hurled, and both Pi and his owl god were grievously wounded. Pele's flashes of lightning were coming with great rapidity. The giant called to his aumakua to fly to the mountains, and then, suddenly changing himself into his dragon form, he dashed up the precipice toward his home. The warriors were so surprised at the wonderful change that they forgot to fight, and only realized that this dragon was their enemy when they saw him far out of the reach of their best weapons. They could see that dragon leaping from stone to stone and swiftly gliding up the steep precipice. He escaped to his home in the mountain recesses and never more troubled the chief by the sea. His employer was killed in a later battle. Pele returned to her home in the volcano Kilauea. 4. The hills of Pelne Pu Pel. Through the fleeting hours of Tuesday, January 8th, in the year 1907, earthquakes were felt all over the island of Hawaii. Soon after midnight, as the stars of the new day, Wednesday, January 9th, looked down on the melting snows of Mauna Loa, a glorious firelight broke out on the southern slope. This light filled the sky above the mountain and was visible from all parts of the island. The Hawaiians said, "Pele has come again." For some hours, great floods of lava poured forth with extraordinary activity, quickly covering a vast area of land on the side of the mountain about 4,000 feet below the summit crater. Then, as the brilliant light of the sun took the place of the glow of volcanic fires, clouds of eruptive gases and smoke marked the course of the lava in its flow down the mountainside. Moreover, For nearly 2 days, the lava found an underground channel from which it burst forth at times with explosions attended by earthquakes which shook the western coast of the island. Puffs of smoke by day and pillars of fire by night marked the course of this underground channel. Thus, for nearly 3 days, the country throbbed with excitement because of the uncertainty attending the continued action of the lava flow. Then came Friday evening, and a sky flooded with an ocean of fire. The lava burst from the side of the mountain about halfway between the summit and the sea in magnificent tossing waves, a river hundreds of feet across, dashing over old lava flows, burning the ferns and trees of the forest which had grown on lava 100 years and more of age. Down it forced its way, sometimes cooling in great stone masses, crunching and crushing against each other, sometimes a rough mass of cinders resting upon a moving bed of fire, and sometimes a swiftly moving liquid stream pushing from under a cooling surface and continually pressing downward toward the sea. Meanwhile, as this lava flow was making its descent, another branch broke away westward. A little hill of lava, frozen ages before into a massive breastwork of black stone standing in the front of this flow of 1907, divided it so that this western branch took its own way to the ocean beach. Thus this mighty force of melted rock from the underworld hurled its vast mass down the mountain, piling itself over all life in its path and leaving only towering heaps of desolation to cover the earth. Between these two branches of the lava river lay stretched a tract of ancient lava several miles wide, desolate and dreary save for small clumps of trees and patches of ferns and grass. At the end of this uncovered old lava, two symmetrical mounds rise from the rugged, splintered rocks. These are marked on the maps of the large island as Napu'opele, the Hills of Pele. In the summer of 1905, two friends journeyed across the desolate country which has been made more desolate by the eruption of 1907. Wearied by the hours passed in traveling over lava sharp as broken glass, these friends found a grass-covered resting place and there waited for their fatigue to pass away. In a little while some Hawaiians drew near. "Aloha oku, friendship to you," was the greeting to them. "Aloha olua, friendship to you also," was the reply. "This place is deserted by almost all life. Surely one cannot expect it to add any story to Hawaiian mythology." "Aye, there is a story which belongs to the two hills of Pele down by the sea. That summer day on the lava of long ago, so long ago that its date is not recorded, we heard the story of the chiefs of Kahuku and the fiery and voluptuous goddess of the volcanic forces of the Hawaiian Islands. Kahuku, the land now under past and present lava flows, was at one time luxuriant and beautiful. The sugarcane and taro beds were bordered by flowers and shaded by long branching trees. Villages here and there marked the population which supported the chiefs of Kahuku. Two of the young chiefs were splendid specimens of savage manhood. They both excelled in the sports and athletic feats which were the chief occupation of those days. Wherever a hillside was covered with grass and the ground properly sloping, holua races were carried on. Very narrow sleds, holua with long runners, were used in these races. Maidens and young men vied with each other in mad rushes over the holua courses. Usually the body was thrown headlong on the sled as it was pushed over the brink of the little hill at the beginning of the slide. Sometimes the more courageous riders would rest on hands and knees, while only the very skillful dared stand upright during the swift descent. Pele, the goddess of fire, loved this sport and often appeared as a beautiful and athletic princess. She carried her sled with her to Kahuku to the Holua hillside, and easily surpassed all the women in grace and daring. Soon the two handsome young chiefs saw her and challenged her to race with them. For hours they sported together, the chiefs led captive by the charms of the goddess. Jealous of each other, they strove to win Pele each to his own home. Thus the days passed by, filled with sports and pleasures. At last the young men became suspicious of their companion. Her love was so fitful and capricious, sometimes burning with a raging fire toward her friends, and sometimes filled with hot anger on very slight provocation. At last a warning came that this beautiful stranger might be the goddess Pele from the other side of the island, that her home was in Halemaumau, the continuing house of the volcano Kilauea, her attendants the always leaping flames, the caves filled with rolling waves of fire, her dwelling rooms, that she carried the control of the fires of the underworld with her wherever she went. The young chiefs talked together concerning their experiences and then began to draw away from their dangerous visitor. But Pele made it difficult for them to escape from her presence. She continually called them to race with her. At last the grass began to die. The soil became warm and the heat intense. Slight earthquakes made themselves felt. The tides were more snappy as they cast their surf waves along the beach. The chiefs became afraid. Pele saw it and was overcome with anger. Her appearance changed. Her hair floated out in tangled masses, touched by the breath of hot winds. Her arms and limbs shone as if enwrapped with fire. Her eyes blazed like lightning, and her breath poured forth in volumes of smoke. In great terror the chiefs rushed toward the sea. Pele struck the ground heavily with her feet. Again and again she stamped in wrath. Earthquakes swept the lands of Kahuku. Then the awful fiery flood broke from the underworld and swept down over Kahuku. On the crest of the falling torrent of fire rode Pele, flashing the fires of her anger in great explosions above the flood. The chiefs tried to flee toward the north, but Pele hurled the fiercest torrents beyond them to turn them back. Then they fled toward the south, but Pele again forced them back upon their own lands. Then they hurried down to the beach, hoping to catch one of their canoes and escape on the ocean. Quickly these young men leaped on. Swiftly came the fiery flood behind them. Pele was urging the underworld forces to their utmost speed. Shrieking like fierce, whistling winds, tearing her hair and throwing it away in bunches, Pele sped after the chiefs. The floods of lava, obeying the commands of the goddess, spread out over all the land of the chiefs, so that from the mountain to the sea the luxuriant lands became desolate. Nearer and nearer to the sea came the swift runners. It seemed as if they had found the way of escape, for the surf waves waited eagerly to welcome them, and a canoe lay near the beach. But Pele leaped from the flowing lava and threw her burning arms around the nearest one of her former lovers. In a moment the lifeless body was thrown to one side. The lava piled itself up around it, while at the command of Pele a new gush of lava rose up like a fresh crater and swallowed up all that was left. The other chief was petrified by fear and horror. In a moment Pele seized him and called for another outburst of lava, which rose up rapidly around them. In a few minutes the hills of Pele were built. Thus the lovers of Pele died, and thus their tombs were made. For many years, even from ancient times, they have marked the destruction of the beautiful lands of Kahuku. Later lava flows have turned aside to spare the monuments of the chiefs with whom Pele played for a time, and the two hills of Pele are still seen near the shore of the ocean. Pel and the chiefs of Puna, Kumu, Kahi. According to the legends, Pele was very quickly angered. Her passions were as turbulent as the lake of fire in her crater home. Her love burned, but her anger devoured. She was not safe. Kumukahi was a chief who pleased Pele. According to the legends, he was tall, well-built, and handsome, and a great lover of the ancient games. Apparently he had known Pele only as a beautiful young chiefess. For one day, when he was playing with the people, an old woman with fiery eyes came to him demanding a share in the sports. He ridiculed her. She was very persistent. He treated her with contempt. In a moment her anger flashed out in a great fountain of volcanic fire. She chased the chief to the sea, caught him on the beach. heaped up a great mound of broken lava over him, and poured her lava flood around him and beyond him far out into the ocean. Thus the traditions say Cape Kumukahi, the southeast point of the island Hawaii, was formed. Here kings, chiefs, and priests have come for ages to build great piles of lava rock with many ceremonies. The natives call these funeral mounds and name them after the builders, although the persons themselves were seldom placed underneath in burial. When Hawaiians who had been ill recovered, they frequently vowed to make a journey of health. This meant that they came to the place now known as Hilo Bay. There they bathed by the beautiful little coconut island, fished up by the demigod Maui. There they swam around a stone known as Moku'ola, the island of life. Then they walked along the seashore day after day until they were below the volcano of Kilauea. They went up to the pit of Pele, offered sacrifices, and then followed an overland path back to Hilo. It was an ill omen if for any reason they went back by the same path. They must make the journey of health with the face forward. Hapo, the dancing stone, Kapoho, the green lake, and Kumukahi were among the places which must be visited. They all have their Pele legends. On the shortest path from Kumukahi to Kilauea is a great field of many acres of lava stumps. These, according to the best theories, were made by immense floods of lava pouring down upon large forests of living trees. Lava always cools rapidly on the surface, therefore, as the lava spread out through the forest, very soon there was a great floor of hot black stone pierced by a multitude of trees. Some of these burned very slowly. The flowing lava would easily push itself up through the small opening around a burning tree, and would keep on pushing and building up a higher and higher cone of lava as the tree burned away, until the tree was destroyed. These cones rise sometimes 10 to 15 feet above the lava floor. They frequently have well-preserved masses of charcoal as their core. This is nature's method of making lava stumps. This field of hundreds of lava stumps has a different origin according to the legends. Papa Lau Ahi, Papa Lau Ahi, the fire-leaf smothered out, was a chief who at one time ruled the district of Puna. He excelled in the sports of the people. It was his great delight to gather all the families together and have feasts and games. He challenged the neighboring chiefs to personal contests of many kinds, and almost always was the victor. One day the chiefs were sporting on the hillsides around a plain where a multitude of people could see and applaud. Pele heard a great noise of shouting and clapping hands, and desired to see the sport. In the form of a beautiful woman, she suddenly appeared on the crest of one of the hills down which Papalau had been coasting. Borrowing a sled from one of the chiefs, she prepared to race with him. He was the more skillful and soon proved to her that she was beaten. Then followed taunts and angry words and the sudden absolute loss of all self-control on the part of Pele. She stamped on the ground and floods of lava broke out, destroying many of the chiefs as they fled in every direction. The watching people, overcome with wonder and fear, were turned into a multitude of pillars of lava, never changing, never moving through all the ages. Papalau Ahi fled from his antagonist, but she rode on her fiery surf waves, urging them on faster and faster until she swept him up in the flames of fire, destroying him and all his possessions. Kei 52, Kuku. Another chief was the one who was called in Hawaiian legends Keli'i Kuku, the Puna chief, who boasted. He was proud of Puna, celebrated as it was in song and legend. Beautiful Puna. Clear and beautiful, like a mat spread out, shining like sunshine, edged by the forest of Malio. Ancient chant. Keli'i Kuku visited the island, Oahu. He always boasted that nothing could be compared with Puna and its sweet-scented trees and vines. He met a prophet of Pele, Kane Akalau, whose home was on the island Kauai. The prophet asked Keli'i Kuku about his homeland. The chief was glad of an opportunity to boast. According to the tales of a venerable savage, the chief said, "I am Keli, Cuckoo of Puna. My country is charming. Abundance is found there. Rich sandy plains are there, where everything grows wonderfully." The prophet ridiculed him, saying, "Return to your beautiful country. You will find it desolate. Pele has made it a heap of ruins. The trees have descended from the mountains to the sea. The Ohia and Puhala are on the shore. The houses of your people are burned. Your land is unproductive. You have no people. You cannot live in your country anymore." The chief was angry and yet was frightened. So he told the prophet that he would go back to his own land and see if that word were true or false. If false, he would return and kill the prophet for speaking in contempt of his beautiful land. Swiftly the oarsmen and the mat sails took the chief back to his island. As he came around the eastern side of Hawaii, he landed and climbed to the highest point from which he could have a glimpse of his loved Puna. There in the distance it lay under heavy clouds of smoke covering all the land. When the winds lifted the clouds, rolling them away, he saw that all his fertile plain was black with lava, still burning and pouring out constantly, volumes of dense smoke. The remnants of forests were also covered with clouds of smoke, through which darted the flashing flames which climbed to the tops of the tallest trees. Pele had heard the boasting chief and had shown that no land around her pit of fire was secure against her will. Keli Cuckoo caught a long vine, hurled it over a tree, and hung himself. Pala. Another chief by the name of Kapapala heard of Pele. He went to the edge of the crater and there found a group of beautiful women. He was welcomed by Pele. They delighted in each other. Many were the games and contests. The chief was so frequently the victor that at last he boasted that he could ride his surfboard on the waves of her lake of fire. She was angry at the thought that he dared to desecrate her sacred home. He defied her, caught his surfboard, threw it on a wave as it struck the encircling wall, then leaped on his board and launched out on the fire waves. It is said that, to show his contempt for the power of Pele, he even stood on his head and was carried safely for a time on the crest of the red rolling surf. Pele became very angry as she saw him fleeing from her over the lake of fire, so she called to her fire servants, the Omakuas, or ghost gods of the crater, and they hurled other fire waves across the lake against the one the chief was riding. These twisted and turned that wave. They broke its crest. The chief and his surfboard were tossed up in a whirlpool of fire. Then he dropped into the heart of the flame and was lost. 6. Pele's Tree. Ohia Lehua is the native name for a tree which abounds in Puna, the region of the volcanic home of the goddess Pele. It has a continual growth of delicately shaded leaves. The young leaf, pink-tinted, comes as the old leaf shading into gray falls from the tree. Flowers, which are like beautiful red-fringed balls, are always found glorifying the varicolored foliage. Here honey-loving birds and bees find their best feeding places. The Ohio forests grow abundantly and rapidly on lava, even recently thrown out by the eruptions from Pele's lake of fire. The Ohio roots seem to find food and drink where the numerous cracks of a lava field open in every direction and vie with the tree ferns in making life take the place of the desolation caused by the volcanic floods. About halfway between the city of Hilo and the volcano Kilauea, there stood for many, many years an old Ohio tree. It was so old that it had become legendary and was known as Ka Lao or Pele, the tree of Pele. Whenever a native came near this tree, he began to search for certain leaves or fruits which he could lay beneath the tree as an offering before he dared to try to pass beyond. These sacrifices were supposed to appease the wrath of the goddess and assure the traveler safe passage through Pele's dominions. 7 Pele and Kaha, Wali. For a long, long time the Hawaiians have had the proverb, "Never abuse an old woman, she might be Pele." This saying was applied to several legends, but it belonged especially to the story of her punishment of Kahawali. Kahawali was a chief born and brought up on the island Kauai. This island was one of the first on which volcanic fires were extinct. It became the Garden Island. It was the most luxuriant in vegetation. Its hillsides were covered with grass, which afforded the very best facilities for sliding downhill. Hinalu meant surf riding, Hiholua meant sled riding or sliding down grassy hillsides. The sleds were usually made of hard, dark kauila wood. Runners made from this wood became very smooth and highly polished. They were 7, 12, or even 18 feet long. They were turned up a little at the front end, where they were 2 to 4 inches apart. They were fastened together with a number of cross pieces, almost the full length of the runners. At the rear end, the runners were about 6 inches apart. There were long side pieces, almost the full length of the sled. Sometimes a narrow piece of matting was fastened over the whole length of the sled, although usually only a small piece was provided for the chest to rest upon. The person using the sled grasped the right-hand side stick with his right hand, then, running swiftly to the brow of the hill, caught the stick of the left side and, throwing himself on the sled, hurled it over the edge and down the hill, sometimes sliding 100 to 200 yards or more. The sled was so narrow and the difficulty of staying on it so great that it became one of the most interesting contests in which chiefs and people delighted. Much practice was necessary before the rider could maintain his or her balance, guide the sled, and gain a velocity which would carry them far beyond any competitor. Sometimes, when the holua track was worn close down to the earth, grass, rushes, and even leaves were carefully strewn over the ground to make easy gliding for the polished runners. Kahawali excelled all the Kauai chiefs in this sport, so he determined to test his skill on the other islands. He had heard of a beautiful young chiefess on the distant island Hawaii who was a wonderful holua rider. His first great contest should be with Pele. He prepared for a long journey, and a stay of many months or even years. Some authorities have placed the time of this visit to Hawaii as about the year 1350. Kahawali filled his canoes with choice sleds, mats, cloaks, calabashes, spears, in fact, all the property needed for use during the visit he had in mind. He took his wife, Kanaka Wahaine, his 2 children, his sister Koai, his younger brother, and Ahwa, one of the young chiefs who was his Icane, intimate friend, and also his necessary retainers and their baggage, and among the most cherished of all, his favorite pig, Aloi Pua. This pig was so important that its name has been made prominent in all the Kahawali legends. They journeyed from island to island. Evidently his father, Olonohai and others of the family came as far as the island Oahu and there remained. Kahawali passed on to Hawaii and landed at Kapoho in the district of Puna. Apparently the chiefs of this part of the island made Kahawali welcome, for he built houses for himself and his retainers, and settled down as if he belonged to the country. The visitors from Kauai entered heartily into the sports of the people, and after a time climbed some lava hills and began holua races. These hills were composed of lava, which easily turned into rich soil when subdued by alternate rain and sunshine. Grass and ferns soon clothed them with abundant verdure. Holua courses were laid out, and the chiefs had splendid sport. Crowds came to watch and applaud. Musicians, dancers, wrestlers, and boxers added to the interest. Kahawali and Ahua were frequently racing with each other. After each race there were dancing and games among the people. One day while racing, Kahawali stuck his spear, which was peculiarly broad and long, into the ground at the end of the race course, then climbed the hill which bore the name Kahahale o Ka Mahina, the House of the Moon. Ellis, who wrote the story of the missionary tour of 1823, said that the racecourse was pointed out to him as Kahalua'ana o Kahavari, the sliding place of Kahavari. He thus describes the hill. It was a black, frowning crater about 100 feet high, with a deep gap in the rim on the eastern side from which the course of a current of lava could be distinctly traced. A woman of ordinary appearance came to the hilltop as Kahawali and Ahua prepared for a race. She said, "I wish to ride." "Let me take your holua," the chief replied. "What does an old woman like you want with a holua?" "You do not belong to my family, that I should let you take mine." Then she turned to Ahua and asked for his holua. He kindly gave it to her. Together the chief and the woman dashed to the brow of the hill, threw themselves on their holuas, and went headlong down the steep course. The woman soon lost her balance. The holua rolled over and hurled her some distance down the hill. She challenged the chief to another start, and when they were on the hilltop asked him for his papa holua. She knew that a high chief's property was very sacred and could not be used by those without rank. Kahawali thought this was a common native and roughly refused her request, saying, "Are you my wife, i.e. my equal in rank, that you should have my hulua?" Then he ran swiftly, started his hulua, and sped toward the bottom of the hill. Anger flashed in the face of the woman, for she had been spurned and deserted. Her eyes were red like hot coals of fire. She stamped on the ground. The hill opened beneath her, and a flood of lava burst forth and began to pour down into the valley, following and devastating the holua course, and spreading out over the whole plain. Assuming her supernatural form as the goddess of fire, Pele rode down the hill on her own papahalua on the foremost wave of the river of fire. She was no longer the common native, but was the beautiful young chiefess in her fire body, eyes flaming and hair floating back in clouds of smoke. There she stood, leaning forward to catch her antagonist, and urging her fire waves to the swiftest possible action. Explosions of bursting lava resounded like thunder all around her. Kahawali leaped from his holua as it came to the foot of the hill, threw off his kihei cloak, caught his spear, and, calling Ahua to follow, ran toward the sea. The valley quickly filled with lava. The people were speedily swallowed up. Kahawali rushed past his home. Ellis says he saw his mother, who lived at Kuki, saluted her by touching noses, and said, "Aloha ino oe ia ihone paha oe make I ke I mane Pele's compassion rest on you." Close here perhaps is your death. Pele comes devouring. Then he met his wife. The fire torrent was near at hand. She said, "Stay with me here, and let us die together." He said, "No, I go, I go." So he left his wife and his children. Then he met his pet hog, Aloipua, and stopped for a moment to salute it by rubbing noses. The hog was caught by Pele in a few moments and changed into a great black stone in the heart of the channel and left, as the center of the river of fire flowed on to destroy the two fleeing chiefs. Rocks scattered along the banks of this old channel are pointed out as the individuals and the remnants of houses destroyed by Pele. The chiefs came to a deep chasm in the earth. They could not leap over it. Kahawali crossed on his spear and pulled his friend over after him. On the beach he found a canoe left by his younger brother, who had just landed and hastened inland to try to save his family. Kahawali and Ahua leaped into the boat and pushed out into the ocean. Pele soon stood on the beach hurling red-hot rocks at him, which the natives say can still be seen lying on the bottom of the sea. Thus did Kahawali learn that he must not abuse an old woman, for she might be Pele. The story often ends with the statement that Kahawali joined his father on the island Oahu and there remained. Other legends say he went to Kauai and there gathered a company of the most powerful priests to return to Hawaii for the destruction of Pele and her volcanic fires. 6 of these priests, according to Mrs. Rufus Lyman, who owned the land of this adventure and whose descendants still hold the same, came to Hawaii with the defeated Kahawali. These were Hail Mau Mau, Ka'auia, Uve, Kahuna, Ka'ua, Nohu, Nohu, Ka Lani'ua Ula, and Ka Pu'i Uli. They took their positions near Kilauea and challenged Pele, crying out, "Where is that strange and wonderful woman, Ka'auea?" The fiery current and Uagahuna priest weeping, and Hail Mau Mau. House of Ferns were kahunas, or priests of wonderful power. They were the only ones who left their names to localities in the neighborhood of Kilauea. Hail Mau Mau had his house of ferns for a long time upon a precipice back of the present volcano house. From there, the name has been changed both in meaning and location to the lava pit, the pit of Pele, in the living lake of fire, where it is called Haul Mau Mau, the enduring house. Ka'auea was the name given to a precipice in the walls of the crater. Uva Kahuna was a high hill on the northwestern side of the crater, overlooking the fire pit and the region around Kilauea. These priests, who were also of the rank of chiefs, were all killed by Pele, except Kahawali, who escaped to Oahu. 8. Pel and Kama. Pua'a. Note: the adventure of the demigod Kamapua has been given in The Legends of Old Honolulu. But because it is one of the most widely told of the Pele stories, it is repeated here. Kamapua was born on the island of Oahu, where he was known as a very powerful and destructive monster, also as a peculiarly handsome and even lovable chief. He was a kupua, a being who could appear at will as an animal or man. He usually appeared as a man, but when his brutal desires to destroy overcame him, or when he wished to hide from anyone, he adopted the form of a hog. He had the two natures, human and brutal. He had been endowed with superhuman powers, according to the legends, and was many times called Pua'akuaho, god of Oahu. There is a curiously marked fish with an angular body and very thick skin, which is said by the Hawaiians to sometimes utter a grunting sound. It is named the Humuhumu Nukunukua Pua. The grunting angular pig. It was claimed that the hogman could change himself into this fish as easily as into a hog. An ancient chant thus described him: "O Kamapuaha, you are the one with rising bristles. O rooter, O wallower in ponds, O remarkable fish of the sea, O youth divine." Kamapua had a beautiful magic shell, the leho. This was a ferry boat in which he usually journeyed from island to island. When he landed, he took this shell in his hands, and it grew smaller and smaller until he could tuck it away in his loincloth. When he sailed away alone, it was just large enough to satisfy his need. If some of his household traveled with him, the canoe became the large ocean boat for the family. Some of the legends say that as a fish, Kamapua swam through the seas to Hawaii, but others say that he used his leho boat, visited the different islands, and passed slowly to the southeastern point of Hawaii to Cape Kumukahi. He crossed the rough beds of lava left by recent eruptions. He threaded his way through forests of trees and ferns, and at last stood on the hills looking down upon the lake of fire. Akani Kolea was the hill upon which he stood, clearly outlined against the sky. Here was Ka-Lua Pele, the pit of Pele, the home of the goddess of fire. Here she rested among glorious fountains of fire, or, rising in sport, dashed the flaming clouds in twisted masses around the precipices guarding her palace. Here Kamapua looked down upon a fire dance, wherein Pele and her sisters, wrapped in filmy gowns of bluish haze, swept back and forth over the lake of fire, the pressure of their footfalls marked by hundreds of boiling bubbles rising and bursting under their tread, until the entire surface was a restless sea covered with choppy waves of fire. Suddenly a great cloud concealed the household, then rolled away, and all the surrounding cliffs were clearly revealed. One of the sisters looking up saw Kamapua and cried out, "Oh, see that fine-looking man standing on a kanikolea. He stands as straight as a precipice. His face is bright like the moon. Perhaps if our sister frees him from her taboo, he can be the husband of one of us." The sisters looked. They heard the tum-tum-tum of a small hand-gored drum. They saw a finely formed athletic stranger who was dancing on the hilltop, gloriously outlined in the splendor of the morning light. Pele scorned him and said, "That is not a man, but a hog. If I ridicule him, he will be angry." Then she started the war of taunting words with which chiefs usually began a conflict. She called to him, giving him all the characteristics of a hog. He was angry and boasted of his power to overcome and destroy the whole Pele family. Pele thought she could easily frighten him and drive him off, so she sent clouds of sulfur smoke and a stream of boiling lava against him. To her surprise, he brushed the clouds away, with a few words checked the eruption, and stood before them unharmed. The sisters begged Pele to send for the handsome stranger and make him a member of their family. At last she sent her brother Cain Hualani to speak to him. There were many hindrances before a thorough reconciliation took place. For a time, Pele and Kamapua lived together as husband and wife in various parts of the district of Puna. The places where they dwelt are pointed out even at this day by the natives who know the traditions. It is said that a son was born and named Opelu Hahali, and that the fiery life of his mother was so strenuous that he lived only a little while. Some say he became the fish, Opelu. This marriage did not endure. Kamapua had too many of the habits and instincts of a hog to please Pele, and she was too quickly angry to suit the overbearing Kamapua. Pele was never patient even with her sisters, so with Kamapua she would burst into fiery rage while taunts and bitter words were freely hurled back and forth. A sarcastic chant has been handed down among the Hawaiians as one of the taunts hurled at Pele by Kamapua. "Makole, makole, akahi, hale ika I opika, hahake I, hi who? Oh, look at that one with the sore eyes. Tell her to go to the Sea of Paika, to wash her eyes and cure them. What food makes her fair as the moonlight? Even her eyebrows were shaved off by some god." Pele was bitterly angry and tried her best to destroy her tormentor. She stamped on the ground. The earth shook, cracks opened in the surface, and sometimes clouds of smoke and steam arose around Kamapua. He was unterrified and matched his divine powers against hers. It was demigod against demigoddess. It was the goddess of fire of Hawaii against the hog god of Oahu. Pele's home life was given up. The bitterness of strife swept over the black sands of the seashore. When the earth seemed ready to open its doors and pour out mighty streams of flowing lava in the defense of Pele, Kamapua called for the waters of the ocean to rise up. Then flood met fire and quenched it. Pele was driven inland. Her former lover, hastening after her and striving to overcome her, followed her upward until at last, amid clouds of poisonous gases, she went back into her spirit home in the pit of Kilauea. Then Kamapua, as a god of the sea, gathered the waters together in great masses and hurled them into the fire pit. Violent explosions followed the inrush of waters. The sides of the great crater were torn to pieces by fierce earthquakes. Masses of fire expanded the water into steam, and Pele gathered the forces of the underworld to aid in driving back Kamapua. The lavas rose in many lakes and fountains. Rapidly the surface was cooled and the fountains checked by the water thrown in by Kamapua. But just as rapidly were new openings made and new streams of fire hurled at the demigod of Oahu. It was a mighty battle of the elements. The legends say that the hogman, Kamapua, poured water into the crater until its fires were driven back to their lowest depths, and Pele was almost drowned by the floods. The clouds of the skies dropped their burden of rain. All the waters of the sea that Kamapua could collect were poured into the crater. Pele sent Lono Makua, who had charge over the earth fires. He kindled eruptions manifold, but they were overwhelmed by the vast volumes of water hurled against them by Kamapua. Kamapua raised his voice in the great ancient chant. "O gods in the skies, let the rain come, let it fall. Let Paua Pele's spade be broken. Let the rain be separated from the sun. O clouds in the skies, O great clouds of Iku, black as smoke, let the heavens fall on the earth, let the heavens roll open for the rain, let the storm come." The storm fell in torrents from black clouds gathered right over the pit. The water filled the crater, according to the Hawaiian kumawaho, i.e., rising until it overflowed the walls of the crater. The fires were imprisoned and drowned. The home of Pele seemed to be destroyed. There remained, however, a small spark of fire hidden in the breast of Lono Makua. Pele prayed for the bright gods of the underworld. Shining in Wawau Vavo are the gods of the night. The gods thick clustered for Pele. Kamapua thought he had destroyed Pele's resources, but just as his wonderful storms had put forth their greatest efforts, Lono Makua kindled the flames of fierce eruptions once more. The gods of the underworld lent their aid to the Pele family. The new attack was more than Kamapua could endure. The Luapele pit of Pele was full of earth fire. Streams of lava poured out against Kamapua. He changed his body into a kind of grass now known as Kukaipua, filling a large field with it. When the grass lay in the pathway of the fire, the lava was turned aside for a time, but Pele, inspired by the beginning of victory, called anew upon the gods of the underworld for strong reinforcements. Out from the pits of Kilauea came vast masses of lava piling up against the field of grass in its pathway, and soon the grass began to burn. Then Kamapua assumed the shape of a man. The hair or bristles on his body was singed, and the smart of many burns began to cause agony. Apparently, the grass represented the bristles on the front of his hog body, which were scorched and burned. The legends say that since this time hogs have had very little hair on the stomach. Down he rushed to the sea, but the lava spread out on either side, cutting off retreat along the beach. Pele followed close behind, striving to overtake him before he could reach the water. The side streams had poured into the sea, and the water was rapidly heated into tossing, boiling waves. Pele threw great masses of lava at Kamapua, striking and churning the sea into which he leaped midst the swirling heated mass. Kamapua gave up the battle and, thoroughly defeated, changed himself into a fish. To that fish he gave the tough skin which he assumed when roaming over the islands as a hog. It was thick enough to withstand the boiling waves through which he swam out into the deep sea. The Hawaiians say that this fish has always been able to make a noise like the grunting of a small hog, so it was given the name Humu, Nuku, Apua. It was said that Kamapua fled to foreign lands, where he married a high chiefess and lived with his family many years. Sometime during this adventure of Kamapua and the domains of Pele, the islands were divided between the two demigods, and an oath of divine solemnity was taken by them. They set apart a large portion of the island of Hawaii for Pele, and the eastern shore from Hilo to Kohala, and all the islands northwest of Hawaii, as the kingdom over which Kamapua might establish rulers. It is said that the oath has never been broken. One of the long legends describes a new island home brought up from ocean depths by Kamapua, in which he established his family and from which he visited Hawaii. It says that Pele saw him and called to him, "O Kamapua divine, my love is for you. Return, we shall have the land together, you the upland, I the lowland, I the lowland." "Return, O my husband, our difficulties are at an end." He refused, saying that it was best for them to abide by their oath and not take any part of what belonged to the other. Perhaps this desire for reconciliation underlies the legendary love of Pele for sacrifices of those things which would most intimately connect her with Kamapua. Kamapua has figured to the last days of Pele worship in the sacrifices offered to the fire goddess. The most acceptable sacrifice to Pele was supposed to be Pua, a hog. If a hog could not be secured when an offering was necessary, the priest would take the fish, humu, kumu, nuku, nuku, pua, and throw it into the pit of fire. If the hog and the fish both failed, the priest would offer any of the things into which it was said in their traditions that Kamapua could change himself. 9. Pel and the Snow, goddess. There were 4 maidens with white mantles in the mythology of the Hawaiians. They were all queens of beauty, full of wit and wisdom, lovers of adventure, and enemies of Pele. They were the goddesses of the snow-covered mountains. They embodied the mythical ideas of spirits carrying on eternal warfare between heat and cold, fire and frost, burning lava and stony ice. They ruled the mountains north of Kilauea and dwelt in the cloud-capped summits. They clothed themselves against the bitter cold with snow mantles. They all had the power of laying aside the white garment and taking in its place clothes made from the golden sunshine. Their stories are nature myths derived from the power of snow and cold to check volcanic action, and sometimes clothe the mountain tops and upper slopes with white, which melted as the maidens came down closer to the sea through lands made fertile by flowing streams and blessed sunshine. It is easy to see how the story arose of Pele and Poliahu, the snow goddess of Mauna Kea, but it is not easy to understand the different forms which the legend takes, while the legends concerning the other 3 maidens of the white mantle are very obscure indeed. Lilino was sometimes known as the goddess of the mountain, Haleakala. In her hands lay the power to hold in check the eruptions which might break forth through the old cinder cones in the floor of the great crater. She was the goddess of dead fires and desolation. She sometimes clothed the long summit of the mountain with a glorious garment of snow several miles in length. Some legends give her a place as the wife of the great flood survivor Nana Nu, recorded by Fornander as having a cave dwelling on the slope of Mauna Kea. Therefore she is also known as one of the goddesses of Mauna Kea. Waiao was another snow maiden of Mauna Kea, whose record in the legends has been almost entirely forgotten. There is a beautiful lake glistening in one of the crater cones on the summit of the mountain. This was sometimes called the Bottomless Lake, and was supposed to go down deep into the heart of the mountain. It is really 40 feet in its greatest depth, deep enough for the bath of the goddess. The name Waiao means water of sufficient depth to bathe. Somewhere, buried in the memory of some old Hawaiian, is a legend worth exhuming, probably connecting Waiao, the maiden, with Waiao, the lake. Kahopokane was possibly the goddess of the mountain Hualalai, controlling the snows which after long intervals fall on its desolate summits. At present but little more than the name is known about this maiden of the snow garment. Poliahu, the best known among the maidens of the mountains, loved the eastern cliffs of the great island Hawaii, the precipices which rise from the raging surf which beats against the coast known now as the Hamakua district. Here she sported among mortals, meeting the chiefs in their many and curious games of chance and skill. Sometimes she wore a mantle of pure white kapa and rested on the ledge of rock overhanging the torrents of water which in various places fell into the sea. There is a legend of Kauai woven into the fairy tale of the Maiden of the Mist, Lai Kauai, and in this story Poliahu for a short time visits Kauai as the bride of one of the high chiefs who bore the name Aiwohikupua. The story of the betrothal and marriage suggests the code of the snow mantle and shows the inconstancy of human hearts. Aiwohikupua, passing near the cliffs of Hamakua, saw a beautiful woman resting on the rocks above the sea. She beckoned with most graceful gestures for him to approach the beach. Her white mantle lay on the rocks beside her. He landed and proposed marriage, but she made a betrothal with him by the exchange of the cloaks which they were wearing. Aiwohikupua went away to Kauai, but he soon returned clad in the white cloak and wearing a beautiful helmet of red feathers. A large retinue of canoes attended him, filled with musicians and singers and his intimate companions. The 3 mountains belonging to the snow goddesses were clothed with snow almost down to the seashore. Poliahu and the 3 other maidens of the white robe came down to meet the guests from Kauai. Cold winds swayed their garments as they drew near to the sea. The blood of the people of Kauai chilled in their veins. Then the maidens threw off their white mantles and called for the sunshine. The snow went back to the mountain tops, and the maidens, in the beauty of their golden sun garments, gave hearty greeting to their friends. After the days of the marriage festival, Poliahu and her chief went to Kauai. A queen of the island Maui had also a promise given by Aiwohikupua. In her anger, she hastened to Kauai, and in the midst of the Kauai festivities revealed herself and charged the chief with his perfidy. Poliahu turned against her husband and forsook him. The chief's friends made reconciliation between the Maui chiefess and Aiwohikupua, but when the day of marriage came, the chiefess found herself surrounded by an invisible atmosphere of awful cold. This grew more and more intense as she sought aid from the chief. At last he called to her, "This cold is the snow mantle of Poliahu. Flee to the place of fire." But down by the fire the sun mantle belonging to Poliahu was thrown around her, and she cried out, "He vera I, he vera." The heat. "Oh, the heat." Then the chief answered, "This heat is the anger of Poliahu." So the Maui chiefess hastened away from Kauai to her own home. Then Poliahu and her friends of the white mantle threw their cold wave over the chief and his friends, and, while they shivered and were chilled almost to the verge of death, appeared before all the people standing in their shining robes of snow, glittering in the glory of the sun. Then, casting once more their cold breath upon the multitude, disappeared forever from Kauai, returning to their own home on the great mountains of the southern islands. It may have been before or after this strange legendary courtship that the Snow Maiden met Pele, the Maiden of Volcanic Fires. Pele loved the holua, coasting, the race of sleds long and narrow down sloping grassy hillsides. She usually appeared as a woman of wonderfully beautiful countenance and form, a stranger unknown to any of the different companies entering into the sport. The chiefs of the different districts of the various islands had their favorite meeting places for any sport in which they desired to engage. There were sheltered places where gambling reigned, or open glades where boxing and spear-throwing could best be practiced, or coasts where the splendid surf made riding the waves on surfboards a scene of intoxicating delight. There were hillsides where sled riders had opportunity for the exercise of every atom of skill and strength. Poliahu and her friends had come down Mauna Kea to a sloping hillside south of Hamakua. Suddenly, in their midst appeared a stranger of surpassing beauty. Poliahu welcomed her, and the races were continued. Some of the legend-tellers think that Pele was angered by the superiority, real or fancied, of Poliahu. The ground began to grow warm, and Poliahu knew her enemy. Pele threw off all disguise and called for the forces of fire to burst open the doors of the subterranean caverns of Mauna Kea. Up toward the mountain she marshaled her fire fountains. Poliahu fled toward the summit. The snow mantle was seized by the outbursting lava and began to burn up. Poliahu grasped the robe, dragging it away and carrying it with her. Soon she regained strength and threw the mantle over the mountain. There were earthquakes upon earthquakes shaking the great island from sea to sea. The mountains trembled while the tossing waves of the conflict between fire and snow passed through and over them. Great rock precipices staggered and fell down the sides of the mountains. Clouds gathered over the mountain summit at the call of the snow goddess. Each cloud was gray with frozen moisture, and the snows fell deep and fast on the mountain. Farther and farther down the sides, the snow mantle unfolded until it dropped on the very fountains of fire. The lava chilled and hardened and choked the flowing, burning rivers. Pele's servants became her enemies. The lava, becoming stone, filled up the holes out of which the red melted mass was trying to force itself. Checked and chilled, the lava streams were beaten back into the depths of Mauna Loa and Kilauea. The fire rivers, already rushing to the sea, were narrowed and driven downward so rapidly that they leaped out from the land, becoming immediately the prey of the remorseless ocean. Thus the ragged mass of Laupaho'heiho was formed, and the great ledge of the Arch of Onomea, and the different sharp and torn lavas in the edge of the sea which mark the various eruptions of centuries past. Poliahu in legendary battles has met Pele many times. She has kept the upper part of the mountain desolate under her mantle of snow and ice, but down toward the sea most fertile and luxuriant valleys and hillside slopes attest the gifts of the goddess to the beauty of the island and the welfare of men. Out of Mauna Loa, Pele has stepped forth again and has hurled eruptions of mighty force and great extent against the Maiden of the Snow Mantle. But the natives say that in this battle Pele has been and always will be defeated. Pele's kingdom has been limited to the southern half of the island Hawaii, while the Snow Maidens rule the territory to the north. Genealogy of the Pele family. There were gods, goddesses, and gods in the Pele family. Almost all had their home in volcanic fires and were connected with all the various natural fire phenomena such as earthquakes, eruptions, smoke clouds, thunder, and lightning. Pele was the supreme ruler of the household. She had a number of brothers and sisters. There were also many Olmakuas, or ancestor ghost gods, who were supposed to have been sent into the family by incantations and sacrifices. Sometimes when death came among the Hawaiians, a part of the body of the dead person would be thrown into the living volcano Kilauea with all ceremony. It was supposed that the spirit also went into the flame, finding there its permanent dwelling place. This spirit became a Pele o Makua. Pele's brother, Kamoho'ali'i, and her older sister, Namaka o Kahai, however, belonged to the powers of the sea. Kamoho'ali'i, whose name was sometimes given as Kamu'ali, was king of the sharks. He was a favorite of the fire goddess Pele. Namaka o Kahai, a sea goddess as a result of family trouble, became Pele's most bitter enemy, fighting her with floods of water according to the legends. Thus the original household represented the two eternal enemies, fire and water. One set of legends says that Kaneho'alani was the father and Hina-ali was the mother. Cain was one of the four great gods of Polynesia: Ku, Cain, Lono, and Kanaloa. Cain, Hua-lani, might be interpreted as Cain, the divine companion or friend. A better rendering is Cain, the divine firemaker. In most of the legends and genealogies, he is given a place among Pele's brothers. There were many Hinas. The great Hina was a goddess whose stories frequently placed her in close relation to the moon. It seems far-fetched to give Hina a place in the Pele family. The name was evidently brought to the Hawaiian Islands from the South Seas, and in process of time was grafted into the Pele myth. Another set of legends published in the earliest newspapers, printed in the Hawaiian language, say that Kuwaha'ilo and Haumea were the parents. Ku was the fiercest and most powerful of the four chief gods. Haumea had another name, Papa. She was the earth. This parentage was carried out in the most diverse as well as the most ancient of the legends and seems to be worthy of acceptance. Kuaha'ilo is in some legends called Kuaha'ilo. In both cases, the name means ku, with the wormy mouth, or ku, the man-eater, the cannibal whose act made him ferocious and inhuman in the eyes of the Hawaiians. Pele has long been the fire goddess of the Hawaiians. Her home was in the great fire pit of the volcano of Kilauea on the island of Hawaii, and all the eruptions of lava have borne her name wherever they may have appeared. Thus the word Pele has been used with three distinct definitions by the old Hawaiians. Pele, the fire goddess; Pele, a volcano or a fire pit in any land; and Pele, an eruption of lava. King Kalakaua was very much interested in explaining the origin of some of the great Hawaiian myths and legends. He did not make any statement about the parents of the legendary family, but said that the Pele family was driven from Samoa in the 11th century, finding a home in the southwestern part of the island Hawaii near the volcano Kilauea. There they lived until an eruption surrounded and overwhelmed them in living fire. After a time, the native imagination, which always credited ghost gods, placed this family among the most powerful Amaquas and gave them a home in the heart of the crater. From this beginning, he thought, grew the stories of the Pele family. The trouble with Kalakaua's version is that it does not take into account the relation of Pele to various parts of Polynesia. The early inhabitants of the region around Hilo in the southwestern part of the island Hawaii, near Kilauea, brought many names and legends from faraway Polynesian lands to Hawaii. Hilo, formerly called Hiro, meaning to twist or turn, was derived from Huiro, a great Polynesian traveler and sea robber. The stories of Maui and Puna came from other lands, so also came some of the myths of Pele.